Hello and welcome back yet again to the No Hair, All Heart podcast. I'm your host, Mookie Spitz, and this is part 3 of Greg's Gift. The gift that keeps on giving. If you're coming to this podcast fresh, the links to parts 1 and 2 are in the description below. I recommend you start with part 1, go to part 2, and then you'll be ready for part 3. And with that, let's continue where we left off. Maybe love of fate was a price I had to pay for being stubbornly independent. A product feature of a hapless guy who thought too much and did too little. Avoiding emotional vulnerability was clearly my defensive strategy, but offensively I was relentlessly resilient and zealously welcomed whatever random and zany adventure this particular universe chaotically hurled at me. Bzz, 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 bzz. My pager vibrated again and again, perhaps echoing throughout the multiverse. Bzz, bzz. I unclipped the device from my belt, gazed again at Greg's number, hit the button to silence it. Is Avon calling? Alexa suggested, hungry again for my full attention. She'd hung pink curtains and vanity mirrors. My closets were jam-packed with her dresses. The sincerest form of flattery. As curious as I was annoyed, I reached for my landline wall phone and gave the numbers a whirl. Within seconds, Greg picked up. Yes, that Greg. Hello, he said, not bothering to ask. Yo, it's Mook. Mook, he replied, my name followed by his characteristically gravel-throated, meth-tweaked, and hustler-faked laugh. He sounded surprised, surprising in itself, since he'd paged me. Ha 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 ha. He continued, already distracted by something else. I'm back in town 17 seconds, and it's hot as a bathhouse, and this air conditioner dumps warm water all over me. He complained, Greg's way of saying hi. His long monologues were always whiny and self-pitying. I wanted to return the bogus AC until I realized I was in someone else's apartment. By the time we got around to discussing his telltale bag, Alexa had finished preparing her 5-course dinner and set a table for 2. She changed into a French maid outfit and winked every few minutes to assure me our new normal was, like this universe, not only possible, but inevitable. Tell him we'll keep his stash safe and sound, babe, until it's light enough to easily carry home. Fuck that, I thought. I'm getting rid of this big bag of drugs now. And Alexa, with all her silicone and estrogen-enhanced accoutrements, no hard feelings, babe, soon afterwards. She, like the Betty Boop on her ass, had become a symbol of cultural, and in my case, domestic, appropriation. Borrowing ideas and identities is cool, but where does the line cross into stealing souls? A wop bop, a loo bop, a wop bam boom was how Little Richard launched his career, and arguably all of rock and roll. Tutti Frutti wasn't aw Rudy at first. Instead, it was good booty, a reference to anal sex, specifically the facilitation thereof, as in, literally, if it don't fit, don't force it. You can grease it, make it easy, and if it's tight, it's all right. If it's greasy, it makes it easy. Really, really, those were the lyrics. You can Google it. Those lyrics got swapped to appease a broader audience, of course, as did the whole song as the audience further broadened. Enter all these white people covering that tune, from Pat Boone to Elvis, Carl Perkins to Johnny Winter, Sting to Fleetwood Mac to Queen. Little Richard got pissed off, but soon realized Pat's milquetoast version opened up more doors than closed. The question to ask when a song, food, clothing, language, sports, any cultural element is boosted from one society into another, especially when the booster is more powerful than the boostee is, does the appropriation pay homage, spread popularity, and add to the original's allure? Or does the lift shamelessly rip its essence and rob the actual creators of their power and their money for that matter? As Malcolm Gladwell reveals, singers like Pat Boone and junk food joints like Taco Bell are more like John the Baptist than Jesus. They invent entirely new versions of classic favorites, and in so doing, often make their source content and cultures even more accessible and popular. In stark contrast is a star like Elvis, who early in his career simply re recorded the demos of Otis Blackwell. The controversy fuels today's cultural and political wars, disparaging intentions driving damaging consequences. Bad mojo can be traced to the late 90s, arguably the height of American dominion. Housing and tech bubbles yet to burst, the seeds of pre 9/11 discontent were already sown into the fabric of a society on the verge of absurdly obsessing over presidential blowjobs. Betty Boop had also been culturally appropriated, falsely attributed to good boy film star Helen Kane, but eventually traced to baby Esther Jones, an African American jazz singer from Harlem. The Boopadoop style was stolen without benefit to baby or her culture, which got me thinking how Alexa borrowed the classic femme fatale, only to lure me their typical kind of mark. Return to sender. What are you doing? Alexa asked, her purple lipstick mouth gaping, her freshly tweezered jaw dropping. She'd changed into a sex kitten outfit, both hands on her hips, lithe and complicated body leaning against a chair to prevent her myocardial collapse as I started tossing all the remaining meth baggies, ketamine vials, and RX bottles back into the tainted duffel. Greg wants his stash back, I curtly replied, still furious about her invasion of my space and robbery of my liberty. I'm meeting him in a couple hours. Please help me put this stuff back into the bag. I gestured to the love shrine, still intact and dominating the living room. Alexa's heart visibly sank, although she had yet to sense the packing eventually meant moving her stuff out, too. I could have told Greg to swing by and pick his shit back up, but my paranoia returned with interest accrued the instant I experienced such complete loss of control with Alexa. I felt irrationally safer carrying his big bag out into the street for a rendezvous rather than risk him following me back to my own front door. Or was I embarrassed to reveal a tranny had moved in with me? Alexa didn't seem alarmed by my mood shift. One second we were both head over heels in love, so to speak, and the next I was fuming furious, getting rid of the drugs and shrine and exuding evil get the fuck out vibes. Ever the drama queen, she instead interpreted my shift as a juicy lover's spat, simply a sign that I cared and not a message that I actually wanted her to leave. Considering our long-term relationship a given, she regretfully but dutifully dismantled her shrine and returned all the memorabilia into the bag. Finishing up, she winked and with comic exaggeration removed several of the baggies and bottles. Saving a few for later, babe, she giggled. Greg owes us a storage fee. I ignored her and the drugs, any excuse to stop talking to her. All told, we had snorted a couple baggies of meth and not even a full bottle's worth of ketamine, along with miscellaneous amyls, downers, etc. Even if you factored in Alexa's storage fee, our flamboyant parting left an imperceptible dent in Greg's vast stash that, coupled with replacing all of his bulky lover's memorabilia, meant I was returning his bag essentially untouched. Alexa must have been thinking what I was thinking as I strapped the artifact closed and threw its bulk onto the couch. You sure we shouldn't take a few more samples, babe? Maybe for quality control purposes? When joking, she sometimes accentuated her natural lisp, an Elmer Fudd-like shuffering shuckatash, turning purposes into something more like purposes. That wasn't all, folks. After this insanity, and despite my resurging paranoia, I wanted to not only skim but rip all the heavy drugs and return only the scrap heap of Greg's disastrous relationship. That wishful thought flashed in a nanosecond, though, as I couldn't wait to get Alexa and Greg out of my apartment and life. Nuking the sex and drugs, at least I still had rock and roll. Around 7 o'clock, we had 2 more hours to kill before I met with Greg and unloaded his bag. That left plenty of time to confront Alexa and kick her out of my pad, but good time management had never been my strong suit. Straightforward interpersonal communication had never been one either, usually resulting in hurt feelings, destroyed relationships, and broken hearts. Besides, we were ravenously hungry, and she had just made an elaborate Italian dinner. Neither of us had eaten anything since yesterday afternoon before she set foot in my apartment. Not much more than 24 hours had passed, but it seemed like a week. Time dilation and loss of appetite caused by the meth that excited our minds and the ketamine that sedated our bodies. One small step for man. Bing! The oven timer rang. That's my starting bell, babe. Her lasagna and garlic bread smelled great, and we sat and ate like adults compared to Liza's mad tea party. Speaking of which, I peered through the side alcove window to make sure she wasn't peering back. The coast seemingly clear, I opened a bottle of red wine and poured us each a glass. Cheers, I toasted. Queers, Alexa goofed. Gay indeed. She'd appropriated a female body and behaviors, then appropriated my whole damn apartment. More Pat Boone than Elvis, closer to Taco Bell than Helen Kane. Alexa held no illusions about who she was, just as I was clear as to whom she wasn't. Far as figuring out who the hell I was, well, that was a whole different story, averse to analysis. Akin to Alice in Wonderland, I'd shrank and grown this week thanks to Greg's gift. Several times, actually, making it difficult to explain myself. Luckily for me, no caterpillar ever demanded any backstory because everyone around me was so utterly self-absorbed. Being a narcissist magnet was fun, but often a drag, also proving a great way to hide, and when necessary, run away. We each have our pivotal defining childhood moment, an incident of acute crisis when under extreme duress we reacted in a way that successfully saved us from emotional annihilation. That winning that winning strategy is hardwired into our minds and bodies and utilized for the rest of our lives as an effective survival technique. I remember my incident. I draw on its advice constantly. I'm 6 or 7 years old, circa 1970, 71. The Apollo moon missions are central to the American zeitgeist, and I'm staring through the glass of a gift shop display at a foot-tall Snoopy doll wearing an astronaut's uniform. My father and I are waiting in a Southern California hospital to hear about my mother, Marianne, recently admitted following a jarring nervous breakdown. We were visiting my father's Hungarian boyhood buddy, a prankster nicknamed Mayom or Monkey. Both families were touristing the Sunset Strip when Mom started freaking out, going mad with thirst. Quickest stop we could make was into a random taco joint, where after finally getting some water, she anxiously paced back and forth, repeating, "I need professional help. I need professional help. I need professional help." I remember the look on the young cashier's face, trying to assure us, but mostly herself, that she'd just called for help and everything would be okay. My mom, meanwhile, continued to frantically pace, visibly hysterical, repeating in a crazed, endless mantra, "I need professional help. I need professional help." I was ashamed and felt somehow responsible. Shame and guilt flipped to fear and excitement when uniformed police swarmed in. They were tall and intimidating, then assuring and cool, reminding me of officers Pete and Jim from my favorite TV show at the time, Adam 12. Appraising the scene, even the cops shrugged, "What the fuck," as my mom couldn't stop repeating she needed professional help. She needed professional help. She got it when the paramedics finally arrived, freaking me out when they took her away in an ambulance. Part of me was terrified I would never see her again. Another part, perhaps for the same reason, felt relief. My whole life, she either obsessively worried about me or completely ignored me. Mom was a toxic maternal mix of asphyxiating love with withdrawn abandonment. The hospital waiting room is next to the gift shop, full of flowers for ailing adults and toys for sick children. Astronaut Snoopy stands defiantly on a glass shelf just above my head, and I gape up at the doll with wonder. The black and white spacesuit adorned with the American flag reminds me of an inverse version of the cool cops I had just seen. All I want is Space Dog Snoopy. Whitney Houston, we have a problem. If mother smothered me with nervous nagging or neglected me with mentally ill self-absorption, then father provided the perfect complement of deafening silence, punctuated by torrents of screaming abuse. Between these states, none of us had much room for conversation. So when I asked Dad a dozen times if he would buy me the totemic cartoon character, he impatiently shakes his head. "Please," I grovel. "I'm fixated on that Snoopy. The doll will comfort me. Its uniform will assure me. The spirit of exploration will free me." My father finally acquiesces, probably just to shut me up. My heart races as I watch the store clerk unlock the glass case and remove the toy. "Want it gift wrapped?" "No." I nod dreamily and excitedly, my arms shaking. I finally have it now. Snoopy plummets to the floor as if in slow motion. The thrill of finally possessing it overwhelming me, my hands losing their grip. A plastic snap shatters my heart and raises the ire of my father, who picks up the figure, turns it over, points at the crack in its helmet, and stares into my being with razor-sharp contempt and derision. "Look at what you did," he grumbles in his native Hungarian. "I broke everything, father fixed it." That encapsulated our relationship from busted toys to his whole life, which nosedived right after I was born when his wife fell into a postpartum depression she nor the family ever escaped. The Snoopy incident was typical, but given how mother had just publicly lost her mind, I am particularly raw, this moment forever defining and transformative. My parents never showed their love, and that was totally my fault. Mother was crazy and father was an asshole because I was a bad boy. Proof being I stood helpless as mom lost it in West Hollywood until they took her away. A feeling repeated as I stood helpless after Dad bought me the best toy in the world and I wrecked it. My emotional annihilation looms. I have nowhere left to go. I wander away from disappointed Dad into the labyrinthian hospital. Initially, I have a purpose, ostensibly to find manic depressive mom. But as I get lost, I realize the farther away I get from them both, the more liberated I feel. In that moment, I learn the power of escape, gain the resilience of relying on nobody, especially those who asphyxiate me with their judgment and their anxiety. Decades later, I continued to wander randomly and purposelessly through the maze of my adulthood. An anti-Theseus who avoided fighting the Minotaur and accepting help from Ariadne. Only gradually did I realize that the monsters and lovers I fled from were the roaring beasts inside my own head and heart. Living alone, I remained invulnerable. Attempting nothing, I never failed. A vivid imagination and penchant for reckless rationalization filled my void. An obsession with creative fantasy and unattainable perfection protected me from banal reality and hard work. Whenever the going got tough, I got going. But somewhere along the way, the signals crossed between the world fucking me up and me saying fuck you back to the world. Was I finally getting unfucked? Ding dong. My Felix the Cat cuckoo clock chimed on the wall and swished its long black tail 8 times, another ode to pre-digital tech, reminding me I now had an hour before my long overdue rendezvous with Greg. Alexa leaped as if hearing it for the first time, calming herself with a contagious giggle and cartoonish plummet into my lap. Your pussy just freaked me out, babe. That was easy enough for her to say. She was a male to female transgender POC attracted to men. I was a bald 30-something white guy with a penchant for jumping into the sack with anyone of any race or gender who had drugs or seemed interesting, sadly, rarely both. For me, sex was just another thing you did with people. Relationships were what crossed the line. Somewhere under the rainbow. Speaking of which, I was eager to end my relationship with Alexa before it ever began, so I took the easy way out and decided we might as well have as much sex as possible before I threw her out. Like junkies doing more heroin to help ease themselves off heroin, my train spotting strategy never worked and was yet another tool in my vast armamentarium of reckless rationalizations. As you might have guessed, another useful tool was drug abuse. In case you're ever in the mood to consume a cornucopia of contraband from high-octane speed to animal tranquilizers to rancid poppers to heavy-duty meds, don't dive in right after a big meal. The baked lasagna and fresh garlic bread we could handle, but the bottle of red wine is what likely pushed us over the edge. After our post-lasagna snorting, popping, and dropping blitz, Alexa and I couldn't decide whether to stand up, sit down, or lie around. My pad suddenly seemed too small, so we both got naked, compressed into fetal positions, and spooned to make more room. Again, I'm sure you're wondering who spooned whom, which is a good question considering all the possible combinations. Arguably, a sign of societal evolution is for you to ask that question now with impetuous curiosity and me to answer it with shameless impunity. 20 years doesn't seem like much in the grand scheme of things, especially culturally. But in retrospect, many of our American mores have changed as radically as our communications technology has, and often because of it. Consider recreational marijuana and gay marriage, both illegal in the late 90s. Nowadays, weed is decriminalized in 15 states, and same sex unions are performed in all 50. Drug laws and gay rights have lagged behind civil and women's rights, but in the past 2 decades, they've made impressive and often surprising progress. Social media is societal agonist and antagonist. These changes are striking, especially for okay boomers like moi, who grew up getting high and fleeing cops. In contrast to walking into a store in 2020 and openly buying joints, gummies, and bags of commercially grown grass, or in the 90s living a risky and ridiculed alternative lifestyle, one now practiced by pansexual college students in campus safe spaces across the country. Nowadays, we take for granted an openly gay athlete or presidential candidate, transgendered CEO, or celebrity homosexual. Yet we so easily forget, especially in urban blue states, not long ago, most gay people were closeted from family, friends, and colleagues. Businesses could fire anyone based on sexual orientation, and gay marriage remained a fantasy. And if I can now break the fourth wall of the story, reading this story on a podcast in 2025, only 5 years after I wrote this story about what had occurred 20, 25, 30 years before then, it's amazing to see how the backlash to the backlash to the backlash has again backlashed. But I'll talk a little bit more about that after I finish. For now, as Alexa and I spooned and Liza likely peered in, America distractedly stumbled through cultural crossroads. Protease inhibitors turned HIV from a death sentence into a manageable chronic disease. Consumer electronics and the internet began to give everyone a voice, and human rights advocates implored federal and state legislators to protect personal and civil liberties. In the theaters, then, Tony Kushner's Angels in America brought to life the repression of the 80s and the great work looming ahead. But on the streets, we were still the demons of Boys Town, inhabiting an island of tolerance, surrounded by a sea of racism, homophobia, and shame. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Back to 2025. Sound familiar? The more things change. Anyway, as any minority group will candidly reveal, nobody is more vicious to its own members than its own members. That made the gay ghetto then a complicated mix of progressive freedom with repressive self-loathing. Carousing was liberating, but the baggage of projected gender and racial hierarchy infused the scene with brutality. At the top loomed the buff white male, and at the bottom, transgendered blacks. In between shone the rainbow and its futile search for a pot of identity gold. Enter the Snearch Man. Whoa! Blurted a familiar siren's call from outside my window and down on the street. Who was that? Where was I? What time was it? Alexa and I were no longer spooning, now awkwardly sprawled on opposite sides of my couch, gaping at each other's naked bodies and wasted expressions. Whoa! Beckoned again, a wail that could only have come from Jackie. The street was replete with hustlers and their marks, drug dealers and their addicts, a yellow brick road of liars and cowards and thieves. Oh my! But the riffraff also snugly nestled some of the greatest talents in the city, let alone the country, gifted actors, musicians, artists, writers, and so many accomplished business people, relentlessly driven movers and shakers. What should have been comfort and transparency between peers and colleagues instead exacerbated competitiveness and cattishness. Familiarity had a mirroring effect that often internalized and released harsh projections of rabid racism, class distinction, cultural snobbery, and sexual conquest. At the core loomed endless identity crises, everyone trying to be someone else. Nobody on the street both embraced and dismissed this paradoxical dynamic better and lived it more thoroughly and successfully than Jackie the Snearch writer. Likely a portmanteau of sneak and search, Snearch described her uncanny ability to simultaneously lurk and look, furtively shun the spotlight, yet furtively remain at the very center of everyone's attention. Used in multiple parts of speech and often within the same sentence, Snearch gave an eccentric yet fitting Dr. Seuss zaniness to her unabashed world of drugs. The Snearch, noun, glamorous Jackie, snearched, a verb, deftly procured, some snearchy, an adjective, denoting high quality, snearch, a noun, namely methamphetamine, and sex. The Snearch snearched some good trade. Get it? The Loki of Halsted Street, Jackie combined the omnipotent sycophancy of a Shakespearean fool with the flippant wisdom of an amoral Jiminy Cricket. Tall and lanky, bespectacled and nearly bald, her butch style was sleeveless t-shirt and jeans. She took drag seriously, but not as a contender, performing as she did everything else, expertly well, but with a mischievous, campy wink. All the world her stage, simultaneously paid performer and paying customer, Jackie magically created a captivating persona as unique as she was derivative, living embodiment of the moment. Along the way, she channeled the agony and ecstasy of nonstop sex and drugs into a lascivious lifestyle of hedonistic abandon that would have made Caesar and the czars blush. And all that grandeur from the vantage point of a barback, a guy who hauled beer from the basement and ice from the coolers. Hating customer service, she rejected in principle offers of promotion to bartender. Brilliantly creative, she accepted every opportunity to spice the dance club up with her colorful murals, paper mache displays, and cardboard cutouts of celebrity performers. The community gesture, she held no power, yet hovered around it, never ruled the kingdom, yet bent it to her will through sheer force of personality. Her playful excess and limitless access bestowed total impunity. Both angel and demon, she was your best friend until stabbing you in the back. Rushing to mend your wounds, she'd slide it out and lick the blade, saving it for later. Figuratively and literally fucked, we always forgave and forgot. While most of us searched, found, lost ourselves again, Jackie gleefully sneaked around and searched behind the scenes, consuming all the street offered with insatiable enthusiasm and infinite variety. She lurked in the bookstore and prowled the alleys, snurching through endlessly recurring nights of lusty wanderlust. Window shopping. On impulse, I rushed to the front window and peered buck naked down 3 stories at Jackie, who shook herself with glee, lifted up her glasses, and squinted as if to make sure she saw what she saw. Catherine the Great and the Romanovs got nothing on you, Daddy-O. Bright light, bit gritty, bad light, fright night. How much is that Mookie in the window? Snearch lingo was a Rumpelmint's shot of non sequitur Russo-Austro-Hungarian historical references and free association in iambic snurchiameter. Jackie convulsed with joy. Chester Cat grinned and waved as I turned around and shuddered to see Alexa standing naked behind me. What brings Jacques out so early? She asked matter-of-factly. Whoa! The commotion was enough to draw out Liza, a voluntary celibate chimera standing in her window across the alcove, staring mournfully at us, arms across her chest. The triangulation between Liza, Alexa, and Jackie also summoned the restless ghost of my perished neighbor, no doubt, whose howling laughter echoed in my ears as he swung to and fro in his closet below. The drugs were likely taking their toll, a cumulative effect. I hallucinated a visit from Mickey and Minnie, too, their serenading "Yes, sir," and "Hey, baby" duet, enough to trigger another impulse to dive into Greg's bag, which started to glow like Marcellus Wallace briefcase. The drugs inside were calling out and teasing our spirits like Moses' tablets within the Ark of the Covenant. As we learned years later watching Big Bang Theory, despite Indiana Jones' best efforts, the Nazis captured the holy artifact, greedily opened it, and got zapped, essentially making the hero's struggle surprisingly superfluous to the adventure's inevitable outcome. By now, I was feeling like Amy's Indy, admirably courageous and indefatigable, but essentially a human MacGuffin. The trajectory of that bag was set, and I was just a tool thrown into the mix. Along the way, people hovered in pairs, incomplete halves orbiting each other, reuniting in bizarre and often incongruous combinations, fighting for equilibrium. I was no exception, struggling with independence, yet succumbing to Liza, Alexa, and the damn bag, hypnotizing me into action. Downstairs, Jackie, check. Downstairs, Jackie was in her element, feasting on this cringeworthy scene with zeal. She somehow managed to simultaneously snurch above, below, and within all the absurdity, gathering data and snurchifying it, eager to fuel tonight's bar gossip, often referring to herself as Belle, Ma Belle. Jackie considered it her solemn snurch duty to broadcast the most scandalous, fails, and salacious gossip, seemingly defying the laws of physics, biology, and psychology. The more snurch Jackie snurched, the more immune she seemed to disease, debility, and death, bearing witness to thousands around her who succumbed to AIDS, overdose, and suicide. Jackie was a stalwart survivor whom we sensed would, against and perhaps because of astronomically unlikely odds, outlive us all. Despite our many obvious differences, Jackie likely had her own Snoopy the astronaut incident, an inchoate moment of crisis, the escape from which molded similar compensatory behaviors into adulthood. We were both estranged from our families, allergic to monogamous relationships, underemployed and overstimulated, yet steadfastly resilient, creative loners. Judgmental and aloof, Jackie's ferocious independence and tenacious self-reliance nonetheless far surpassed my faltering attempts. Behold the living embodiment of personal freedom. The Snurch is superhero, super Snurch, preferring to haul ice from basements rather than serve any freak. Snurch fresh trade each night than compromise within any relationship. She was free by the numbers. I clearly was not, proven by the Snurch rolling her tweaked eyes and laughing her ass off from below as I continued to stand naked in my front window with a transgendered live-in girlfriend standing naked behind me, all of us enduring the judgment of my Jewish guilt inferno handjob only fa girlfriend. Managers meeting. Whoa, Jackie creaked. Everyone's respective line of sight was mercifully incomplete except my own, a full 360 which now swung back around and looked beyond Alexa's fake tits and boosted ass directly to Greg's big, bright blue bag. In German, gift means poison. Jackie's unexpected performance reminded me of that curious apropos cross-lingual pun. Greg, the bag, our rendezvous. What time was it? Again on cue, Felix the clock cat chimed and swished 9 times, scattering my 3 feral cats and again freaking Alexa out, who broke from her reverie and realized she was standing full frontal in front of Liza. They both panicked and leaped out of sight, my relief only temporary as I gazed back down to Jackie, who now huddled with, go ahead and guess, you get only one. Oh my fucking God, the last thing I needed was for Greg to tell Jackie all about this toxic mess. I mean, seriously, what did I do to deserve this? The possible good news, Greg was often so incoherent, not even Jackie could understand what the hell he was talking about. The more probable bad news, Greg told all and Jackie bolted upstairs in a nanosecond. Gimme some Snearch, Pops. Thankfully, their various tits, ass, and dick gestures suggested more pressing interest in trashing me and my house guests than exposing felony drug storage and delivery services. As I watched them genuflect and gossip, I also realized Jackie was one of Greg's best customers, making it a really bad idea for Greg to even hint that Mookie and his tranny had all his goodies upstairs on ice. Focus! Greg and I conspired during our call to do the handoff on a lane place underneath the giraffe statue, a neighborhood artistic landmark constructed entirely of welded chrome bumpers. In retrospect, we should have planned to meet in an alley or even the lobby of a building, but the giraffe sprang to mind, and I figured no matter how wasted Greg was, he could likely find it. So I left Jackie and Greg to their own shady devices, got dressed, and pulled myself together. Not only were we late to the drop zone, but I just remembered that the bar I managed opened at this time and I needed some coverage. Fingers crossed, I paged Minnie, who miraculously called me back in minutes and generously agreed to fire things up until I made it in. I felt wiped out, and the weekend bar shifts hadn't even begun yet. Totally exhausted, I was disappointed in myself and everyone else. By 1997, all my superheroes had peaked. God outlived Friedrich Nietzsche, Eddie Van Halen lost his balance after balance, and Thomas Pynchon would publish his most monumental, yet last great novel, Mason and Dixon, a few months from now. Where had all the good times gone? Having donned pink bunny-eared jammies and fuzzy slippers, Alexa agreed. You're a mess. She helped lift the bag into my arms, pulled its strap over my right shoulder and across my chest, finally rested its unwieldy bulk onto my left hip. I was now fully loaded with the active ingredients of 2 crazy days and dreaded lugging it downstairs. I also dreaded running into Liza. The probability of crossing paths could be calculated with a few variables, including the frequency and duration of our movement in shared spaces. Her spying on us was another variable, arguably the most significant, since she was likely listening at my door the whole goddamn time. Euler's number E also figures into such calculations, but I was over it and just didn't give a fuck. Secret rendezvous. I ran right into her in the lobby. Liza stood flush with her mailbox, opening the tiny door, then closing it, opening it again, then slamming it shut. Moving out, she snapped, head nodding at the big duffel. No, just doing some spring cleaning, I winked, pulling on the bag straps. Want some methamphetamine, ketamine, amyl nitrate, GHB, Ritalin, or... Stop! What's the matter? I taunted. You already stocked? How about a stack of love letters between 2 guys? She winced, locked her mailbox door, stared at me. Actually, I'm kidding. Alexa's in the bag. I got rid of her. Want to see? Want a piece? Her lack of surprise surprised me. Her lack of shock shocked me. She was credulous and fascinated. Really? Are you telling the truth? Outdone in cynicism, I bolted, aghast at her unexpected reaction to me murdering her rival. Was I also too passive with Liza? No wonder tough guys seem to always get laid. Darwin favored brutes, biologically engineered to kill strange guys and impregnate their chicks. If I had actually killed my strange guy who was also a chick, would Liza have at long last fucked me? Doubt it. Upstairs, Alexa was comfortably safe and sound, still pink and fluffy, giving me a thumbs up. Outside, I saw no sign of either Jackie or Greg, so I headed a block over to our drop point beneath the chrome giraffe. The bulky bag made me paranoid again, more eager than ever to finally get rid of the tainted thing, and with it all the intrusion and confusion hurled at me. With these thoughts swirling, I hardly noticed that all the cars that usually lined both sides of Cornelia and Elaine Place were replaced by boxy white trailers, electric service vehicles, and stand-up tents. Neighborhood street festivals were common in the spring and summer, but I should have known better since the Market Days Fair wasn't for 2 weeks yet on Memorial Day. Swarms of people within the tents, hovering around catered food tables and going in and out of the trailers, should also have been obvious clues. But rather than sensing the clear and present danger, I took solace in the crowds and considered them optimal cover for my handoff to Greg. Amid all that commotion, who'd notice? On an empty street, we'd really stand out, right? Another data point of false assurance was the giraffe sculpture itself, which was cordoned off with yellow tape and given open space on either side. Portable incandescent lights were set up every few feet in lieu of the street lamps, which were turned off tonight. So, despite the frenzy of activity, the semi-darkness around our meeting spot made me feel comfortably incognito. I was more than 20 minutes late, but got there first, snooped around, felt curiously at ease, bent under the do not cross tape surrounding the sculpture, and sat on its cement base. Most art is difficult enough to create without having to weld large car parts together. What the fabled steel giraffe lost in subtlety and nuance, it more than made up for in originality and effort. I felt the same about the neighborhood and its characters. Today we inhabit a polarized culture of social media jacked tribalism. On the one side, politically correct social justice warriors selectively outrage themselves into censorship. On the other, race-baiting neo-fascists lurk disguised as freedom of religion and speech advocates, enraptured by a perverse cult of personality. Back in the 90s, people couldn't rant through instantaneous global two-way digital, so they tended to listen to, speak with, and debate each other. Society grappled with statistically higher levels of racism, bigotry, and homophobia, yet battles of opinion were secondary to visceral expressions of physical immediacy and impact. Nobody cared how you felt. What did you do? We tore each other up and thrived. My odyssey began a few years earlier when I quit corporate to work in the hood. First night was at the main bar of the Vortex nightclub where I got trained by none other than Jackie herself. I greeted the alpha dog bartender. "Hi, how can I help?" He stared at me like my father did, hurled a bar rag in contempt, and said, "Go and fuck yourself." I was in. Not since middle school had I endured such enthusiastic self-loathing and incendiary bullying. Most of the gay clubs on the strip were gay-owned. This one wasn't, turning up the Glengarry Glen Ross heat between an absentee boss and his cannibalistic staff who did whatever they could to stick it to the man and each other. A wretched hive of scum and villainy. I was hooked. In a straight club, you had to screw the manager's girlfriend or renege on gambling debts to get your ass kicked. In this world, simply having the audacity to show up, let alone throw shade, got your heart ripped out, tossed around and shat on, photographed and reprinted in the local gossip paper. Good, bad, or ugly, you were a moving target, and only the cuntiest survived. These continuous battles, no matter how petty, repetitive, and infantile, gave us a sense of self and provoked a purpose. Being hated on the outside made us feel special on the inside. Identity is usually ad hoc and tenuous if you make it up yourself. But if your enemies define you and thrust it upon you as a way to marginalize, abuse, and control you, then game on. Hashtag bring it. Today's generation has the luxury of being more free, open, and accepted. But what's lost in the struggle is, frankly, the struggle. Endless dynamic tension helped us navigate through disorientation. I wasn't the only one lost at sea with no bearings or anchor. A misfit among misfits, I fit in. I made as much sense as anyone else around me, which wasn't much, but was enough. With the American Empire at its height in the 90s, hypocritical brutality was our way of getting woke. Many wax sentimental for a mythical golden age, personal or societal, but history once in a while actually triggers magical moments, transformative periods of disruption, paradigm shift, and quantum leap. We felt something special was going on, and in retrospect, we were right. In the thick of this visceral renaissance, I accepted and consumed Greg's gift, now eager to return it and move on. Part symbol, part catalyst, and all MacGuffin, the artifact embodied the essence of whom I wanted to become and what I still needed to shed. How much longer could pointless defiance coexist with self deprecating fatalism? Were slackers out of style or still cool? 20 minutes later, I was getting nervous. Had Greg spilled the beans with Jackie? Did the freak show freak them both out and send them scattering, leaving me to literally hold the bag? When in doubt, follow the money. In this case, lots of it, the street value resting on my lap, far exceeding anyone's discomfort, paranoia, or laziness. I was certain Greg would eventually show. And within a few more minutes, he did. Greg had the annoying habit of sneaking up behind you, a bit Snearch-esque, but lacking any of Jackie's charm or creativity. So at first I only heard his deep but whiny voice, already complaining from the semi-darkness. I'm so glad we're meeting in a fucking circus. Watch me sell bumps to pedophile clowns and midget acrobats. I got pissed and wanted to shout, "You're welcome," for harboring his shit this week, then suggest he sell his leftover photo booth funnies featuring him and his boy Gary strung out at a circuit party taken just before they beat each other up. But I refrained. Truth be told, he didn't put a gun to my head to take his bag or any of the goodies inside it. And who said I wasn't having any fun yet? I hope you're having fun. I certainly am. Hang on tight for part 4 of Greg's gift. And thanks for listening to the No Hair, All Heart podcast. Stay tuned. Next up,